Welcome to this session. Looks like we have more than half the audience. This is clearly where it's at. Direct-to-consumer brands can go hang. This 10 minutes is around making, or how data is making television even more effective. And I really like John's intro because I don't think we should be seeing survival as the good outcome from all of this. It has to be about growth. And fundamentally, we believe that data is going to be the catalyst for continued growth in the ad-supported TV ecosystem. These sessions are normally around half an hour, presenter would have, and they'd leave the audience with three things. I have 10 minutes. I will therefore leave you with one thing, and that is that data will be the growth driver of the ad-supported TV ecosystem moving forward. So in 5 years, when we all regather in a more salubrious room even than this one, you can hold me to that. The first point, I think, to cover is this idea of effectiveness, because this is really where it's all predicated upon. This is going to be, by the way, a sort of a picture rather than data-led set of slides. Exhibit A. When you type into Adobe Photo Stock, how advertising impacts the human mind, this is what you get. So fundamentally, the thing that we do with our day job, that we spend all of our time doing, this is the one picture that represents your entire careers. If anybody wants to get a copy of that, we can send it to them afterwards. But let's focus on that effectiveness point. For people who haven't read the study, and I highly recommend people do, there was a great piece of work by Binet and Field in conjunction with the IPA, who spend a lot of time looking at what makes successful advertising and what media is best at delivering successful advertising, where success is actually not about a creative award at Cannes. Those are great, but they don't keep businesses going. This is about sales, long-term sales growth. And it transpires that more long-term sales growth is driven by the branding impact of advertising than it is by the response impact of advertising. And the great thing is that television is the best at driving the brand building impact of advertising. It is the single best media for putting that through. In fact, when they looked at both the short-term results of this, 70% of all TV ad campaigns had a profitable return. When they looked at it over the longer term, 3 years plus after the campaign finished, 86% of TV campaigns delivered a profitable return. And that outstripped any other media form by a long way. You then get on to profitability, which is a study by the Gain Theory and Ubiquity, which really looked at the extent to which advertising effectiveness is working, again, across different channels. And what they brought home was that television is, again, the single best channel at delivering brand effectiveness, and that brand effectiveness is the single best driver of long-term value, long-term sales growth for an organization. The point is that TV has been relatively losing some share of advertising budgets, and it's been losing it to other channels where people have been able to do more with data. And some of those impacts that have been being driven by that are quite short-term, but they're impacts nonetheless. So I guess the challenge here is, how do we allow data to come into the television ecosystem at considerably more scale to drive the type of results that people are seeing from other areas? As we move on to this idea of identity, just on the effectiveness point, a really interesting thing is that of the £5.1 billion of TV ad revenue we saw in the UK, I realise there's a European audience, but focusing just on the UK for a second, 760 million of that came from digital-only brands. These are the people who are pioneering the use of other channels for delivery of their services other than conventional outlets, and yet £760 million of their marketing budget was actually invested on television. As more data becomes available, TV becomes an option for even more types of advertisers, for even more use cases. And I think this is really the crux of what we'll see over the next few sessions and what we believe the future success of ad funding TV is going to be driven by. In total, last year, when looking at the advertising data, 867 advertisers in the UK were either new to TV or returning to TV after a prolonged break. This shows that actually there is this market, there's a new set of advertisers there. There's new money available if the television ecosystem exists in the right form to be able to take that. There's a good learning from what we've seen with Sky. Sky's AdSmart, which essentially allows to overlay a new data targeting layer onto television. When that launched, and actually has been recently revamped with NBCU also taking that tech in-house, one of the things that we observed was actually most of the advertisers, the majority of the advertisers who were using that platform, were new to TV. They weren't being cannibalized from other television budgets. These were new to television. So can that happen at more scale? We believe absolutely it can if people understand who's watching the TV set. And the data to understand who's watching the television set now exists in more volume than ever before, and increasingly that ecosystem is evolving to make it easier to plug into, to make it more interoperable, to increase the compliance across regulatory frameworks, and to actually turn it into things, to turn the consumer data people have into targetable, addressable audiences that can now be activated more and more on the television screen, not just on small screens through what we knew as programmatic media over the last 5 years. I think there's going to be an interesting question on the panel about, or coming up, I won't steal John's thunder, but one of the things that has to come with all of this is measurement. In the UK, the TV industry has a gold standard measurement in the form of BARB, and that has supported £5.1 billion worth of advertising last year. But in and of itself, BARB isn't enough to do exactly what we need to do here. It's great for the purposes it was devised. It is evolving by its own admission. We see Dovetail, we see other initiatives in order to make it cover more areas. But fundamentally, one of the biggest evolutions that needs to happen here is this idea of measurement and how we get to a consolidated, consistent view of what effectiveness looks like so we can all agree upon it, we can all trade upon it. There are people in the audience who know more about measurement than me. Hello, Ian Dowds. But this is going to be one of the core tenets of how we take all of this forward. The one great opportunity for TV in this evolving ecosystem is that it can avoid blowing its own leg off like the digital industry did at the very start of it by embedding the click as a really good idea for how this idea of direct response was going to be a fail-safe mechanism for proving effectiveness over any other channel. There's been a huge amount of talk in the other room in the first hour and a half of this session, and will be more so in here, around this idea of collaboration. And one of the points of just this introduction is about the perils of closed ecosystems and data flows that maybe go one way, but then you don't get it to come back again the other way. There will doubtless be talk in the direct-to-consumer area where these brands have been predicated. Data is actually their asset, really their only asset. They have no resellers, they have no channels to rely back again, and the power of their data drives their business. And it's those type of brands who are the biggest challengers to these ideas of you just don't use as much data in marketing, you don't use all your data in marketing, or give us your data but we won't give anything back again in terms of actually being able to prove effectiveness. So we're going to focus a lot on how we actually work as partners, how we collaborate, and more of this idea of the things like the industry consortia that John talked about for how we kind of overcome some of these barriers. And the last one really is about this idea of team. One of the things that's existed certainly within the programmatic ecosystem, a big debate over the last 3 or 4 years has been to in-house or not to in-house, the role of the agency, do they add enough value, do they have the skills to be able to use all of your data? And to our mind, those are some of the logistical challenges, but fundamentally, very, very few people are going to go out and succeed in all of this on their own. We would fully expect there to be still agencies involved in the majority of instances of brands doing great marketing through the environment of TV, because we're not saying TV has to fundamentally change, you throw everything else out the window. There's a lot of TV, as we've seen from what we just saw earlier, that's incredibly effective. This is about building on that effectiveness and adding new ways of being effective to attract even greater set of advertisers with more use cases that can be measured and supported in order to actually to grow rather than sustain the ad-supported ecosystem. So The cogs on this are symbolic of your relationships with your agencies, your technology partners, other people in the stack that will evolve, things like data onboarding. And we can talk about our work, for example, with LiveRamp and Identity Link, and how we're starting to create common cogs, if you like, for machines that can start to do this at a lot more scale within the TV industry. So with that, my 10 minutes are up. I will hand back to John. Thank you very much.